G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic Monday and a great start to your week, and that you had a great weekend. If you live in the US, you had a fantastic Memorial weekend as well, an incredibly important day of remembrance. Now, today, as always, we have a lot to cover. We will be looking at the maps, as the Deep State map has updated to show Russian advancements in several directions and the restarting of some axes of which we have seen stopped and stalled now for a while. So that is interesting, and we'll look at some comparisons between maps as well. We'll look at Ukraine's recruitment of prisoners into the armed forces and how that is going to work, and speak about the effectiveness of this. We'll look at missile strikes into Ukraine from Russia. We'll look at, importantly, the type of missile and exactly what were these targeting. Then we'll look at, in Kharkiv, we'll look at the speech Zelensky made on the ground at the shopping centre and some bits in that, and talking about the peace summit. Now, just as a bit of a public service announcement, straight off the bat, I just want to say that for us collecting information and building what we see of this war, remember to seek many different angles, voices, and people in this. Remember that, like it or not, social media builds algorithms which, of course, feed confirmation bias, and none of us are above that. Now, why does it feed that? Well, it wants to keep you on the website, and by keeping you on the website, it has more ads, therefore they make more money. Now, of course, this creates a professional and monetary incentive for creators to lean into this confirmation bias with their content. So you may need to listen to multiple creators as well, as there's incentive for that. And what we don't know is we don't know what levers behind the scenes are being pulled on those algorithms to swing people's opinions in different ways as well, especially leading into things like elections. Now, let's speak about in Kharkiv and Zelensky's speech. So we saw those strikes against the shopping centre. Now, yesterday we said the casualties at the moment are sitting at 4 killed, but that we will see an increase in that. And I believe currently it's sitting at 16 killed and dozens injured. And we have seen strikes as well back into civilian areas in Belgorod, up in this region, the northeast of the country as well. Now, Zelensky has released a speech from on the ground there, and we will go through it. But I wanted to show you something first, of which we said we will see this comparison being made with bombing, with what we've seen the ICC and the arrest warrant for Netanyahu, which of course the US and other countries are saying is illegitimate and have no jurisdiction. So Al Jazeera, I guess, is an extreme example of this, but you can go and have a look in other areas and you'll see many of the top comments are speaking about this. This is the moment Russian strikes hit a crowded hardware store in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Israel doing the same every minute of the day, 24/7, not a war crime based on the precedent set by Israel and the USA. And this is what I spoke about in length the other day, that the ICC warrant released for Netanyahu, of course there was an ICC warrant well over a year ago released for Putin, but with the US saying that this is illegitimate, there's no jurisdiction of this, well, it sets a precedent for then all of those warrants. Now, yes, I know the US is not a signatory to this, but it's still a very important country, of course, in the world. Now, whether you believe this comparison is fair or not, if it's whataboutism, if it's apples or oranges, is regardless of the point that many people are seeing it this way. And I've spoken about now that that is seen illegitimate for Netanyahu, that the other ones will come into question as well, that you can't have A without seeing to B as well. So it will be interesting there, and I believe that system is really on its absolute last legs. Now, in Zelensky's speech, he says here, there is nothing that wouldn't become a weapon for Russia, including hunger. Now, this as well is what people are talking about, because in the ICC warrant for Netanyahu's arrest, one of the points was the use of hunger as a tool of war. Zelensky says we are defending ourselves 60 kilometers northeast from this place, and yet another attempt of the Russian assault. Russia is preparing for an offensive actions also 90 kilometers northwest from here. So let's have a look. So of course we're talking up in Kharkiv. Let's do some figures of distance. 60 kilometers, talking about Vovchansk. Then we'll talk 90 kilometers from Kharkiv. You're up in this area on the east side of Sumy. Now, if you remember maybe 5 videos ago, one of my contacts said that down in here in Lipsy, this is not the westernmost point of axes for Russia, that there will be a push up in this region around here somewhere. So that is interesting to see, that 90 kilometres lining up there then as well. Now, Zelensky then talks about the global peace summit of leaders, of what he says, whom Russia won't be able to deceive. I'm appealing to the leaders of the world who are still aside from the global efforts of the peace summit, to President Biden, the leader of the US, and to President Xi, the leader of China. And we'll talk at length about this peace summit. But what we do know is, upon Ukraine's request, Russia was not invited to this. And Russia has said that if it doesn't take into account what is happening on the ground currently, then they're not interested either, or words to that effect. And that we actually know Biden may not be attending then either. Biden's set to skip Hollywood Peace Summit for Hollywood fundraiser that has George Clooney and Julia Roberts there as well. So much more important that, I guess, than geopolitical war that you've got going on where you're spending hundreds of billions of dollars. But this peace summit, I think the word peace summit is throwing off what people are expecting to come of this. At the end of this peace summit in Switzerland on June the 15th, their guns aren't going to fall silent, the borders move back and something signed. It's not that. What this is a bunch of nations coming together at Ukraine's request to put more support towards Ukraine to achieve what they see as a victory and their goals based on Zelensky's 10-point peace plan. Now, that peace plan, points 5 and 6, talk about territorial integrity and the return to 1991 borders, with Russia pushing off there. Now, that's why a peace summit would have negotiations on having the guns fall silent. A summit rallying support, the only way, if you're starting at that 10-point peace plan, to achieve that peace plan is military support to drive Russia out of here, if that is possible, through more military aid and maybe intervention as well. So that's what it is. Don't think that on June the 16th, the guns are going to fall silent and a new border be drawn. It's not starting on that basis. It's starting on the 10-point peace plan. And this is why officials from Russia have said that they're not interested, is if it's starting there, yet the situation on the ground does not reflect that as a beginning, then they're not interested. Now, there's three main things I think this peace plan will focus on. Now, firstly, and we saw Zelensky use this and say this up in Kharkiv as well, saying this is why we need more air defence. So point one, I think, at this will be air defence from NATO into Ukraine. Now, what we do know is many countries are trying to find and supply air defence for Ukraine, but it is very limited around the world, especially what's happening down in the Middle East with more Patriots being used, whether in Israel or against the Houthi rockets as well, the Iranian rockets, that more of that is being used and there's not as much available. Number two, I believe, is going to be the permission for strikes using NATO weapons against Russia. Now, yes, we've seen some countries say, yep, we're happy, Finland, Sweden, Estonia, countries like that, but these countries and what they supply compared to nations like Germany, the UK, and America is significantly different on the tactical outcome of those weapons being used. And we have seen the US holding fairly strong that no, our weapons are to be used within Ukrainian territory, not outside. Will we see a change on that? Maybe. I think for Ukraine to achieve what it sees as its goals of clearing back, there's no way that could be done without those restrictions lifted there either. But I do think that Ukraine could be shooting themselves in the foot a bit with some of these strikes against like nuclear warning systems. There potentially was another strike on one overnight that the US may be thinking, well, we don't want you using our weapons against that. Maybe you're pushing further away from that. We spoke about the strikes on oil fields as well and refineries maybe having that same then effect. But I think we will see some restrictions lifted on that. We know the UK spoke about it, but then we haven't then seen, say, storm shadows heading into Russia either. So we're not really sure what's happening there. And I think the third point here will be NATO troops inside Ukraine. Personally, I can't see Ukraine clearing back any of this territory, meaning like Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, without some sort of intervention to free up more third-line logistical supply troops somewhere to get more men in the front line in the fight, knowing the huge attritional aspect it's going to take to push through these incredibly heavily defended areas. So I think there will be more discussion on that, and the longer this war goes on, the more chance I think we are to see NATO troops, whether in combat roles or logistical roles, regardless, come into NATO to have some relief there as well. I think it is, there's countries saying, oh, we'll supply it, but we're not going to go in first. So I think that will be very interesting to see what then actually happens on the future there too. But let me know what you think of this. But the idea of the peace summit and guns falling silent, no, that's not what is going to happen. So let's have a look at the maps. Of course, here we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, and Kharkiv, where we talk a fair bit. The red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Of course, this is the northern offensive that we're seeing up in here. Now, we aren't seeing any change up in this north now for a couple of days, but we are seeing some very interesting changes in the eastern and northeastern side here. So we are seeing out near Berestove here as well, more pushing down to the south. Of course, this has come out over the past couple of weeks and is putting now more pressure on areas like Novoselivsky and Kuzimivka here, as well as it is enveloping in here. And that is the tactic we see Russia employ more. We haven't seen much moving in Kislivka for now a few days. Now we'll push down to the south and we don't see any changes through Belorivka. We see then in Bakhmut a small change here, updating to what we do know from geolocated footage, at least now a week old, of a Russian tank operating in and around here. But Deep State has shown more Russian advancement up into Chasiv Yar. What we do know from footage released from the Foreign Legion is door-to-door fighting happening right around where my cursor is from about a week ago. So the grey zone should definitely be extended to have all of this now in here, but we are seeing movement in that area. Now, nothing around Klishkivka, where many will say there's a lot of updates. Then we'll come down to Avdivka. And here is where we see then a lot of movement. So this is the Avdivka front, Solovov, Osheretny front. Here we can see a large movement to the east out of Solovov, heading towards Sokil here as well. Of course, this puts pressure in both north and south from these advancements, as well as up in the north from Avdivka, more ground being made. And what we do know is that in here, we have seen many attacks as well in certain areas, and there may be a Ukrainian withdrawal back to the other side of this waterway if that hasn't then already taken place. So that is very interesting to see there. I've got one of my things left. And then we'll push down then into Netelove, which is what we expected then to see in this area. Further envelopment. Then the next push will be towards Kharkivka, as we have seen Netelove here be pushing more and more to try and work its way down to use the open ground to the advantage. And let's have a look here. And what we spoke about would be an attempt to envelop these open areas in here. Then we'll push forward, have a look right here. Then we see more then up to today of this then happening through Ulmansky, through Netelove as well. So that is very interesting to see down here, and what the doctrine of which we've seen Russia follow talk about before. Now we come down to the north and we can see more push to the east of Novomyarivka. Updates only the Russian maps showed us a couple of days ago out of here, so we can see more of a push there. Paraskovskia, some maps show more in here, some show less, but that is very interesting to see in here as well. Then we can see out from Solodovka here as well a Russian advancement through two tree line paddocks up to probably a defensive line within the tree line here. That's why we see tree line to tree line fighting. But of course, this push out here, as well as around Ugledar, is putting pressure on more of these areas. And the push out from Novomyarivka, trying to get to areas like Konstantinivka, puts all of this in a vulnerable spot as well. And we can see a small advancement here. I'm not sure if this is in Pavlivka or Mikilsky, but a Russian advancement just down to the south of Ugledar. We haven't seen any movement there for a while. And we come up into Krasnohivka. We said yesterday here that the Noel report's map was a little bit behind, and that he today has then filled in just on the eastern side of the roundabout in here, now showing actually more than the Deep State map, more similarly towards now the Syriac map update. But we don't have any change down in Robotny. I think that will come at some point. But we can see in here, and this is the advancement that people are saying, the Western advancement that Russia has restarted on the Avdivka front to try and close up this territory. We know there's a lot of open ground in here, in here. And of course, this important train line runs through here, as well as the road running from Pokrovsk through to Osheretny as well, to try and close up this, of course, making headway to more central locations and putting pressure north up into Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. But the axe is there, of course, in Bakhmut too. So some important shifts being made there. The deep state map is not showing what Suryak spoke about yesterday of the Ukrainian flag being hung right on the outskirts of Kozachi Liri as well either, which is interesting to not see that. So that is then the maps for the day. Now we did see, and the New York Times does point out, we did see that Russia has recruited prisoners before to fight in its war, and there was a mocking of this being used as well. But Ukraine has begun releasing prisoners to serve in its army, part of the wider effort to rebuild a military that has been depleted by more than 2 years of war. Ukraine Justice Minister said in an interview on Friday that nearly 350 had been freed under a law enacted last week that allows convicts to serve in the army in exchange for the possibility of parole at the end of their service. The judiciary was already considering most of the 4,300 applications submitted, up to 20,000 applicants. The policy echoes a practice widely used by Russia to bolster its forces, but differs in some ways. Russia's program is open to prisoners convicted of violent crimes, while Ukrainian law does not extend people convicted of 2 or more murders, but you can do 1 murder, I guess, or other serious offences. What we have seen as well is these are convicted criminals. We have seen Ukraine recruit before people have been convicted through the courts as well. Recruit, instead of going through that system, you can come and join. And that the Ukrainian investigation spoke about people avoiding justice through that system as well. We have some photographs here of these prisoners then being recruited, and I think you'll see the similarity between these photos and photographs we saw around this time last year when a certain bald bloke was in Bakhmut. Now, we did see missile attacks and drone attacks overnight towards Ukraine from Russia. Now, the majority of these have said to be shot down, so all the KH-101s and all the Shaheeds. Again, Ukraine it is illegal to film any impact of these, and we have seen then the SBU knock on people's doors, make them film videos and apologise for that. They have that media blackout of missiles absolutely on lockdown, so it's very actually hard to confirm this, but 0 of these Kinzhal aeroballistic hypersonic missiles, which to us screams that there is a massive lack of Patriot systems. We do have video here of Ukraine then shooting down one of the systems here as well, as we can see it explode in spectacular fashion here, and then coming down there. Now, this is something that I wanted to look at here. Now, what we can see here is the red are the KH-101s, the yellow are then the Shahed drones, and the blue are these Kinzhal ballistic missiles, and that the majority of these are all aiming for the same area in here. What is here? There is an airfield here. Now, we have no idea what damage was done. Remember, 2 of the Kinzhals were not intercepted. Did they reach their target? Most likely. Now, the airfield in here, this is likely where we will see the F-16s base. And I think we will see more and more targeting of these bases to try and rip up the bloody airfield or whatever to hit where these fighter planes are coming in. We know within weeks we should be seeing them within Ukraine. Now, I still think there are chances that these F-16s are going to be stationed outside of Ukraine, will fly in unarmed, will land, weapons go on, and then be used in combat operations, circumventing some of maybe the rules in place. I don't know. I think that is maybe, I can't see how successful they're going to be sitting on an airfield somewhere. That said, Russia hasn't been able to fully deplete Ukraine's original air force yet either. So it will be interesting to see exactly what happens here, but I think strikes like this are going to then increase dramatically. Now, legends, that's all I've got for you today. I did not get any sleep at all last night, so I know it's shorter and I've probably stumbled upon a heap, but look after yourselves, have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye-bye.